This is Electric Theory, the podcast where people power performance and innovation. I'm Joshua from Bolt Human Capital, and after years of helping service-driven businesses transform from the inside out, I've learned one thing: culture isn't soft. It's a system. Each week, we spark bold conversations that challenge outdated thinking, reduce costly turnover, and explore how technology, leadership intersect to unlock the human potential. If you lead with people, this is your playbook. Let's plug in.
You have 24 hours a day. Organize your day. Work hard. I'm here to talk about success.
Welcome to Electric Theory.
You've arrived at your destination.
The Electric Theory is a public research engine behind Bolt Human Capital. We record virtually with leaders across the hospitality and service industry. Audio quality varies by guest. The conversation never does. Guests appear as independent voices. Their views do not represent their employers or affiliated organizations. This episode is supported by the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Business Program at Dallas College. Stay electric. Today's guest is Phil Murray, the CEO of Milk and Honey, one of the most recognized and fast-growing spa and wellness brands in the country. Phil leads Milk and Honey, a luxury spa and a salon brand known for its commitment to elevated guest experience, high-touch service, and a culture rooted in wellness. For both clients and team members, under Phil's leadership, Milk and Honey has continued expanding its footprint while staying true to its core values of quality, consistency, and care. His background spans from finance, operations, and executive leadership across private equity-backed and growth-stage companies, giving him a very unique perspective on scaling service-centric brands. Phil, welcome to Electric Theory. It's great to have you. Let's plug in.
Thanks, Josh.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Speaking of that finance background, I love the chalkboard behind you. It looks like you've been going to work. I love a good chalkboard session, whiteboard session. That's where it's at.
That's right. We sometimes brainstorm here, and I always have to remember that when I brainstorm out here, it's a little harder to remove.
Yeah.
But I kind of like it.
Right. But yeah, Phil, let's kick things off. What's the story behind your path into leadership and just ultimately what led you to Milk and Honey?
Yeah. So, I came had an interesting background in the sense that I had to kind of work my way through high school, college. And actually, I counted one time, I worked 13 jobs between age 16 until I graduated college. And so I was doing everything from restaurants to working in kind of the engineering departments of large manufacturers to doing web design and helping start up at the time a dial-up internet provider. I'm doing tax return preparations at restaurants, just a wide variety of things. And so I learned a lot about people, particularly for my age, and the kind of people I wanted to work with and the kind of work I wanted to do and the kind I didn't want to do. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, thought I would be a computer science major. Wasn't so amazing. So I ultimately determined I wanted to be working more broadly across businesses. So I finished with a business degree and really got out and just landed at a fairly small construction company of all things based in Charlotte and worked for the founder there. And one of the unique things about my journey and ultimately rose to become CFO there over about a 9-year period. And one of the interesting things about my career journey is not only at that company, but the subsequent businesses and every business I've ever been at, I've worked directly for a founder. And so I've learned a lot about the entrepreneurial world and how to channel their vision and help grow their vision without squashing their entrepreneurial energy. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of get to play an entrepreneur by working very closely with them. And so that's been a surprising part of my career journey as well. So maybe that's something to start there.
Yeah. I actually love how you said you always work for a founder and you learn not to crush their entrepreneurial, really just energy, if you will. Does that same thing apply to the employees that not only work for you, but generally speaking, with that same kind of connection or the way that you treat employees? Should you approach it in that same type of way?
That's a really interesting. I'm not sure I've ever made that connection, but I think that's a good question. And I think that's right. A lot of what I figured out around working with founders, they're people. Correct. We're all the same in one sense. And so they have things they care deeply about, and they're deeply invested in this business, certainly emotionally, typically financially. I mean, you can't just come in and try to jerk things away from them or try to make sudden changes without context and communication. And so kindness and treating people with respect and all those kind of, high EQ things are really going to matter a lot. And so I've often thought, these things I've learned about working with founders, in many ways, they're just good old leadership principles that you could kind of apply to any situation. And so I think, over time, I have softened my approach and learned when to be direct and when to be a little more indirect and when to do a lot more listening. Man, I wish I was a better listener 20 years ago. Yeah, I think there is some overlap in terms of how you build a culture, how you deal with every employee.
Right. Yeah. Milk and Honey has a fantastic reputation for delivering premium guest experience. How would you describe like the culture that makes that possible?
Yeah, we give a lot of credit to the founder who 20 years ago, Alyssa Bayer, started Milk and Honey, and she's still involved, and as an advisor in the business. But she, from the very beginning, she wanted to create a really unique experience that she had when she lived in San Francisco and New York. And we didn't have that kind of thing here in Austin, which is where we started and where we're headquartered now, and wanted to create a really unique experience and environment. And so not only kind of the physical aesthetic of the space, but how people were treated when they came in, kind of an elevated approach. At that time, particularly in the early 2000s, most people had not experienced something like that except for maybe, a trip to a resort destination spa. And so, that permeated everything she did in terms of how she hired people, how she designed services, how she designed the spaces, and very early on offered benefits in the industry. In many cases, we're still just, employing people on a 1099 basis. And so doing a lot of things from the very beginning. And so in many ways, my job is just to preserve that legacy, right? And to continue it. And we have our ways of measuring all that. But at the end of the day, we've got to uphold our core values. Kindness is one of our 5 core values. And again, that's been there from the beginning. And I've always thought that was really unique and special too.
That is very unique. And you mentioned preserving. How do you preserve that high touch, wellness driven culture without diluting what makes Milk and Honey unique?
Yeah, it's a challenge. I mean, I would say we are still figuring it out. I think we're doing a good job, even at times a very good job. When we kind of have a brand that we have and our aspirations to be this elevated player in the spa and medical spa space, in some ways the work is never done, right? It's continuous improvement. And the reality is our space does have higher employee turnover than many industries. And so we've got about 700 employees across our 10 locations, even if everyone from headquarters to location management to service providers in the space is operating perfectly for one day, one perfect day. We know the next day there's going to be some new people in the environment and maybe some people who have left. And so over the course of even 6 months, there's enough change, certainly a year or two, there's enough change in terms of the people working for us, such that we really do have to institutionalize those practices. We can't rely on just a core group of people that have been there forever. They're vital,
Right.
But our systems also have to reinforce how we want to treat people, how we want to behave. And so we've leaned in a lot into changing up how we orient employees, thinking of it more as a system, right? They're humans that come in the system and we want them to act a certain way, behave a certain way. It's the very thing that drew them into the business. And then so teaching them how to be that for other guests too.
Yeah. You mentioned turnover. What are some of the biggest operational challenges you face when scaling a multi-location wellness brand just across different markets?
Yeah, well, turnover is one. I would say it's been less of an issue the last couple of years, and we've done some things to reward tenure as well as performance in our space. Probably the biggest challenges we have day in, day out is keeping our location managers focused on the primary things that drives performance in the business while not crushing the guest experience. I mean, it all starts with the employee experience, right? If we get the employee experience and they're happy, they're going to provide a good experience for the guest.
Right.
And we know good guest experience means return guests, which means you're going to be a successful business financially or otherwise. And it's just really interesting in our business, right? If you have an employee that's in the break room, let's say it's a massage therapist, and maybe they had a upsetting interaction with a coworker or with the location manager, or maybe they're just having a bad day or something personally is going on.
Right.
Well, they're going to get up from their seat at the point in time, right? And they're literally going to walk 20 feet down the hall and literally put their hands on people to give them a massage, or if it's an esthetician, to give them a facial. And those people are our guests are going to tell if someone is carrying their own stress and their own burdens and their own anxiety with them, right? And so the work is never done in terms of, keeping people in a good space to provide good experiences for our guests.
In a world right now that's just ever evolving as it relates to guest experiences. How do you guys elevate to meet those ever evolving expectations?
Mhm. We learn a lot from others. Will Goddard, I'm sure you've heard of the book on reasonable hospitality. I would guess
Yep.
you probably talked about it in here, had other people talk about it.
Yep.
It had a huge impact.
Mhm.
And I personally my wife and I went to live in Madison Park just before the pandemic, so early 2019. And we've honestly had as good or better food in many places, but I still can't think of a restaurant where the service experience was better. It really was like just blew it through the roof. And so, how do we learn and innovate? I mean, we're constantly surveying our customers. We're studying our NPS score. We can see that at a location level, a kind of service category level, even down an employee level if we need. So, constantly monitoring that, making sure managers are constantly responding to bad scores or feedback that comes in, providing 20,000, 22,000 services for
Right.
20,000 guests or so a month. And so, there's always going to be some moments we don't execute perfectly, but it really is kind of a continuous journey, surveying our employees, what's working well. I try to stay in really close touch with what's going on in the industry. I'm part of a couple of industry associations. And so we're all learning together every day. And what people really wanted and cared about 10 years ago sometimes changes.
Right.
Some things change. They want to be warmly greeted. They don't want the Gen Z stare or whatever, right? They want to have a warm welcome into the space. They want the space to be beautiful and clean. But there's also some differences now, right? They want to be able to take photos on their phone for Instagram. We generally like that too, in the right moment. And so even as culture changes, some things remain the same and then some of the particulars change.
And something about great service just makes the food taste better too. It just makes the experience unforgettable. And no matter if there was a mistake, it could be rewritten by just really, really exceptional service. And I think that sometimes founders, operational managers, just sometimes may sleep on that. And it
Mhm.
has a really, really huge impact. And what also has a really huge impact is the type of people that is hired. And when you're hiring service providers, spa managers, or just front of house staff, like what qualities or mindsets stand out to you and that's essential for Milk and Honey?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say I'm a big kind of personality test junkie, right?
Yeah.
That's the junkie, personality test junkie. And, I personally lean a little on the direction of the extroverted side. But I know a lot of introverts that play extroverts at work.
Yeah.
And so to me, it doesn't matter what your core personality type is. The real question in hiring, though, is I think, how can you show up for guests in our space? And so if you're going to struggle to keep a smile on your face and
Right.
say happy to the next guest that comes in, that's going to be a challenge. We talk all the time about the fact some of this is the nature of what we do, but I'm sure experience the same in a restaurant or other environments, retail environments, where someone comes in, they have a need. And so they're probably coming in and walking through those doors in like the worst place. They've got some shoulder or back tightness, or they've got some skin issues they want to work through with a really deep cleansing facial, or they're coming for a med spa appointment where they want to have some correction on their face. And so people are coming in, maybe expectant, but they're not necessarily in a great place. And so our front desk people have to, frankly, show a measure of self-control and internal confidence that they're not expecting to get anything from that guest, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're in a giving mode. That person comes in and they are warmly welcoming them. They are overlooking any snippiness, irritation on the guest part. They're doing everything to kind of absorb all that and make their experience amazing. And to your point, what you said, which is, you go to a restaurant, it's not just about the food, it's about everything around it. And same with our spa experience. We think our service providers provide amazing experiences the large majority of the time. But if it's just a mediocre service, they experience facial massage, whatever, haircut, that's unfortunate. But if it's okay, everything else wrapped around it is amazing.
Right.
Again, warmly invited into the space with smiles, someone who cares. The locker room is beautiful and clean. The lounge is relaxing as it should be.
Mm-hmm.
Your service provider certainly cares about you, even if they just service quality.
Right.
And the way back out, that's going to be a great experience. So I completely agree with that. And we talk a lot about that. The only other thing I'd say on hiring is when we look at our location managers,
Yeah.
really, and I like to ask this question when I'm interviewing location managers, either promoting an assistant, interviewing them for a promotion to a general manager, or just hiring from outside of the business. I ask, where do you think managers lose their way, that the managers that aren't successful here, where we have to part ways, either voluntary or involuntary. What do you think the theme is? Actually, I'll ask you, Joshua, what do you think? What do you think derails them? What category of problem?
That is a great question. I was flabbergasted about the question. I was like, man, that probably sends them down a series that they've probably not been asked before in an interview. I would say the loss of connection or even just relatability or understanding the why anymore. That's what I would say.
Yeah, that's close to how I would describe it. By the way, connection is another one of our 5 core values.
Awesome.
We care about that human connection so much.
Yep.
Yeah, the way I would say that, and a couple of people have kind of gotten on the right path here, but the way I answer the question is the managers that don't work out, in summary, they lack self-awareness and don't understand how to interact with frustrated employees, maybe even angry employees or sad employees. They have not figured out how to manage their own energy, their own priorities, and be in a space where they can open that office door and know that chaos is going to come in and out throughout the day, most likely. Different operational issues, logistical problems, people issues, employee issues. It's just the nature of the world, right? These things are going to happen. And they've got to be able to respond to all that with a calm, self-aware attitude. They've got to listen. So often manifests the struggle where they want to be right, where they want to do the right things. It's well intended. And I do these things too. I understand this because I have the same struggle. But hopefully, and fortunately, usually I have people around me, friends, coworkers, that kind of say, hey, this wasn't good. You need to check yourself. You need to approach these situations differently. And we certainly do everything we can to coach our team. We're fortunate to have an amazing management team. So it's not like we have this, extremely high turnover, extremely high problem with this. But it is interesting when you see failures, it's often on the people side. And we see and hear this all the time in articles around the world, right? HR articles, leadership articles. When you look, I think the average, particularly first-time manager, just thinks about all the things they got to do and like, oh, maybe they didn't manage inventory well, or they forgot to do this report or didn't drive revenue. Well, those things matter, but man, it's the people and the connection piece that really is going to drive their success as a leader.
I find it really interesting that you asked that question. And I think that's a question that hiring managers should definitely ask. And, as it relates to self-awareness, it is just losing touch, losing that sense of connection. Because without being connected, you're just not essentially aware of what's going on around you, what's going on internally. And that's when you lose sight of the vision and the why. You've led many companies in different industries. What leadership lesson or tough moment has had the biggest impact on how you operate today?
Well, it to not be redundant, but maybe to just drive the point home.
Yeah.
It was a moment where I had a junior employee that had enough courage to confront me about how I dealt with them. And this was at the construction company years ago. Her name is Jenny. Jenny, thank you for this. I've never been able to thank you for this, but I was functioning essentially as CFO in this business at the time, and she was a billing coordinator, and she did a great job. She was super quick through it. I kind of audited the billings every day, and because she was so fast, she just was prone to making more errors. And I would audit the billings. Of course, she got better over time. But, I was just, I don't know what I was, 26, 27. I was just kind of like moving fast and getting stuff done, right? And one day she said, hey, Phil, can we meet outside of the picnic table at lunch for a little bit? I was like, oh, boy. This sinking feeling like, oh, I'm in trouble. And she's like, hey, you're really great at getting work done and being super clear on what we're supposed to do. And she said, but where you're not so great is caring for us and knowing what's going on with us as humans, or expressing all this in a caring way. And she's like, it's bad. And I was like, oh man, you're so right. And I'm so sorry. And I'm sure it wasn't like a switch flip, but it did lead to a change for me in my approach. And I've told that story many times since, and had another story like that. I think that makes the point.
No, that's awesome. The way she even gave feedback was textbook, right? You led with the positive and then was like, hey, but this is where you can improve. Yeah. Before we jump, what's one principle or core value or quote that you essentially live by?
That's the hard one. Only one. You didn't prepare me either for this. I mean, probably the overarching leadership principle I'm trying to lead with is helping people learn. I'm a big believer that, I mean, there's plenty of businesses on the edge of either highly regulated space or experimental space, think, crypto, AI, whatever. Things could go awry from a regulatory market perspective and the business could fail. But I tell you, if you've got a business that's working inside of an industry that's proven to have a demand pattern like spas, medical spas, like these businesses aren't going anywhere. If you're in like most businesses where there's clear demand for your services and you've got a group of learners working there, it's going to be very hard not to be very successful. Said differently, it's going to be easy to be very successful in the long run.
There you go.
Because my knowledge, my skills, whatever I know today, if I stop changing and growing in 5 years, I'm probably going to be fairly ineffective, maybe even irrelevant. And so I have to keep learning and our teams have to keep learning. And I give a lot of credit to our managers and everybody in our company to constantly push that huge continuing education culture, not just for our service providers, but for team members at corporate. So that's really the overriding thing that I like to talk a lot about and focus a lot on with our teams.
Beautifully said. Always be a learner. Phil, thank you so much for sharing your insights and your experiences today. There's been so much here for operators, leaders, service-driven brands to learn from. Thanks to everyone tuning in to Electric Theory. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and join us next time as we talk with more leaders shaping the future of work, culture, and service excellence. Until next time. This episode is supported by the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Business Program at Dallas College. If you're building a service-driven organization and want culture to become a measurable performance lever, visit bolthumancapital.com. Until next time, strengthen leadership, protect culture, and scale reliability.